This recording was produced by Oregon Trail Baptist Church. If you'd like to get more recordings, or to leave your feedback, please visit us at www.otbchurch.com or write us at P.O. Box 298, Guernsey, Wyoming 82214. We look forward to hearing from you, and we hope that today's recording will not just challenge your thinking, but will transform your life.
All right, let's get started this morning. We are on the Ten Commandments, so let's get started with Exodus 20.
Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou nor thy son nor thy daughter, thy manservant nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day, and hallowed it. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. Exodus 20 verses 3 through 17.
So we're starting on page 8, if I remember correctly, with the Old Testament development. We're dealing with the law. So we've already talked about how this commandment is specifically laid out for like a courtroom setting, and that's probably the emphasis of the fact that that is where the truth most needs to be told. Not that we shouldn't be truthful anywhere else, but it's critical in a courtroom setting because judgments and decisions are going to be made that will affect people's life. So it's critical the truth is there. However, we should be truthful in all acts of life. So in the law, so the first 5 books of the Bible, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, there's a few things here, and this is by no means an exhaustive list of telling the truth in any of these categories. But number 1 here, refusing to divulge pertinent information is a sin. In Leviticus 5 we read, "And if a soul sin, and he hear the voice of swearing, and is a witness, whether he hath seen or known of it, if he do not utter it, then he shall bear his iniquity." So what's happening here is you have swearing or blaspheming God. You have here a connection between the person who actually sinned and the person who is a witness. Okay, now, do we have terms for this maybe in our own society today? Where someone does something wrong, and if you withhold information, is that perjury? Perjury would be lying under oath, wouldn't it? But if you're withholding pertinent information, I can't think of what it is.
It's dishonest.
Well, yes, it's that.
It's obstruction of justice.
Well, it would be obstruction of justice, wouldn't it? Okay. So here we have lying in the realm of you know something to be true. You know a piece of information that is vital to a case or whatever, and you choose to keep it quiet. Okay, that is as guilty of telling a lie as lying. You got a word? That might be it. Disclosure. Yeah. I could. Yeah, but not now. Anyway, so morning, Dennis. His Bible bag in one hand, eggs, well, in the same hand. He's got his coffee cup in the other. Oh, no.
You'd make a great mom.
Yeah. All right. So that's a helpful thing. Lying is not just the active distorting of truth with our tongue. Lying is also the inactive withholding of truth when it's needed. Number 2 here. 2 witnesses were required. In Deuteronomy 19, it says, "One witness shall not rise up against a man for anything, or for any sin, in any sin that he sinneth. At the mouth of 2 witnesses, or at the mouth of 3 witnesses, shall the matter be established. If a false witness rise up against any man to testify against him that which is wrong, then both the men between whom the controversy is shall stand before the Lord, before the priests and the judges, which shall be in those days. And the judges shall make diligent inquisition. And behold, if the witness be a false witness, and have testified falsely against his brother, then shall ye do unto him as he hath thought to done unto his brother. So shalt thou put the evil away from among you. And those which remain shall hear and fear, and shall henceforth commit no more any such evil among you. And thine eye shall not pity, but life shall go for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot." So here we have 2 witnesses are required, especially when death penalty or anything really serious is on the line. Now, why the 2 or 3 witnesses? And that's in simplicity, that's exactly what it is. Because it's easier for one person to come up with a lie than it is for 2 or 3 people to agree on a lie and to actually keep it coherent.
I don't know whether the Lord had this in mind, but I can tell you, as a former corroboration testimony,
Yeah.
all 3 of them may be telling the truth as they saw it, but each
Has a different angle.
is going to have a different angle.
Right. So they're all going to have a different angle, but there should be a continuity to them that you're able to piece together. And sometimes in that, one witness may have a little misinformation. They're not necessarily deliberately lying, but it's a little misinformation. Others can distinguish that. Actually, okay, I'm going to geek out a little. There's an apocryphal book that actually has a story that deals with this. And it's, what is it? I can't remember the name of it. do with Daniel, and it's not necessarily the Daniel from the Old Testament. But anyway, so in this story, this young woman is accused. She's basically she's confronted to commit adultery. These men are trying to get her to do that. She refuses, and she stays faithful to her husband. And yet, in the middle of that, these two guys, which also happen to be religious leaders, they start accusing her of committing adultery. And so they bring together and they make an accusation and all this and that. And Daniel, who ends up as her defendant, you could say, he says, well, let me question these men. So he asks them questions like, well, what tree did you catch them under? And the one said one type of tree, and when he questioned the other one, he said a different type of tree. So he figured out there's a lie here. There's something going on. I find it just simplistic that the Old Testament says, okay, you got to have at least 2 or 3 witnesses. Because truly, if I don't like someone, if I can conjure up a story about them, I can ruin their life. I could frame them in such a way. Our court system today is actually more leaning towards some of the public testimony and witness, even when it's sketchy, which is why I think I mentioned it last week. The gentleman who spent 10 to 15 years behind bars because he was accused of rape, but then 10, 15 years later, she says it happened. Well, his life has been changed for 10 to 15 years. His life has been altered in a way that cannot be reversed. So there's also a punishment. If you are caught in a lie, in the courtroom setting, if you're caught for lying in this way, what was the punishment for that? Yes, Elizabeth? Morning, Nicole. Not just death, but it was eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Whatever would have been the punishment to that person that you were, because of your lie, would have brought upon them, that gets brought upon you. Hi. She's coming right up here. So anyway, that's very helpful, very insightful. The Old Testament really took it seriously. Number 3, gossip and slander are condemned. We're on page 8, once you're settled. At the bottom. Well, we may not be there long, though. Gossip and slander are condemned. Exodus 23:1. Thou shalt not raise a false report. Thou shalt put not thine hand with the wicked to be an unrighteous witness. Leviticus 19. Thou shalt not go up and down as a talebearer among thy people, neither shalt thou stand against the blood of thy neighbor. I am the Lord. So you're not to be involved in slander and gossip, and keep your own business is maybe a simple way to think of that. Deuteronomy gives us a judgment on slanderers. This is specific with a husband slandering his wife, but it says in verse 13 of Deuteronomy 22, if any man take a wife and go in unto her and hate her, and give occasions of speech against her, and bring up an evil name upon her, and say, I took this woman, and when I came to her, I found her not a maid, then shall the father of the damsel and the mother take and bring forth the tokens of the damsel's virginity unto the elders of the gate in the city. And the damsel's father shall say unto the elders, I gave my daughter unto this man to wife, and he hateth her. And lo, he hath given occasion of speech against her, saying, I found thy daughter not a maid. Maid here is the concept of a virgin. And yet, these are the tokens of my daughter's virginity. And they shall spread the cloth before the elders of the city, and the elders of the city shall take that man and chastise him, and they shall amends him with 100 shekels of silver, and give them unto the father of the damsel, because he hath brought up an evil name upon a virgin of Israel. And she shall be his wife, and he may not put her away all his days. So here's a man who makes a false accusation against his wife, saying, you weren't faithful before marriage. You were, and you lied to me. And he's making a false accusation. And there's a lot of Old Testament customs in here that I'm going to leave out since there's kids in the room. But anyway, he's he's making this false accusation against her, and truly, if he can divorce her or put her away from his life, her life is ruined. Because in a certain sense, now I understand, with the grace of God, yes, she'd be living, but she didn't have a way to support herself in that economy in that time. You didn't really go get a job or anything like that. She's now been publicly shamed and humiliated. And so it's very serious, the accusations made here. So his judgment is very severe. He gets chastised by the elders. He gets fined. And he's, yeah. So, comments, questions before we move on to the historical books. Okay, so in the historical books, I just put a couple examples here. We have the example of Jezebel's false witness for Naboth. I think I mentioned that last week, where she brings some men to be a false witness just so they could get Naboth killed and they can take his vineyard. We also have false rumors that were used to intimidate Nehemiah. In Nehemiah 6, we read, "Then Sanballat sent his servants unto me in like manner, the fifth time, with an open letter in his hand, wherein was written, it was reported among the heathen, and Gashmu said, that thou and the Jews think to rebel, for which cause thou buildest the wall, that thou mayest be their king, according to these words. And thou hast appointed prophets to preach of thee at Jerusalem, saying, there is a king in Judah. And now shall it be reported to the king according to these words. Come now, therefore, and let us take counsel together. Then I sent unto him, saying, there are no such things done as thou sayest, but thou feignest them out of thine own heart. So the story that's happened here is Nehemiah is servant to the king of Judah. He's his cupbearer. He gets permission of him to come back, to restore the wall, to rebuild Jerusalem. And these people against him are now spreading rumors that, okay, well, the reason he really wants to rebuild the wall is so he can get Jerusalem fortified so he can rebel against the king. Okay, so they're starting to spread rumors about his motives that were not true. And so this is a good example of how rumors and lies can spread. And what is the purpose of it? It's to damage other people. That's one of the things when we deal with lying and the truth. We are generally either covering our own tracks or the tracks of others. We're either covering something or we're trying to damage something. Now, that's not necessarily Bible truth. That's just as I'm thinking simplistically about lying. We're either trying to cover or we're trying to damage. And the truth is, a lie here, a rumor being spread, was to do nothing but hurt God's people. And God was able to stop that, to mediate the consequences of that. And the king trusted Nehemiah, and it didn't become a problem. But we've all been around people. One little piece of information, and now everybody thinks this about this person or that person. And it can be very dangerous. Wisdom literature and Psalms. There is a lot in the wisdom literature and Psalms dealing with lying. The psalmist cries out for truth. He says in Psalm 119:29, remove from me the way of lying and grant me thy law graciously. Proverbs describes how God hates lying in Proverbs 6. These 6 things doth the Lord hate. Yea, 7 are an abomination unto him. A proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that deviseth wicked imaginations, feet that be swift in running to mischief, a false witness that speaketh lies, and he that soweth discord among brethren. Now in that whole list, lying, false witness, speaking lies, sowing discord, all that kind of gets lumped in more than once. Of all the different sins that Proverbs classifies as God hates these get listed more than once. So we should take heed to that. Number 3, righteous men hate lying. Proverbs 13:5, a righteous man hateth lying, but a wicked man is loathsome and cometh to shame. When we try to live righteously, we should never take lightly when someone is a liar. Because if they lie in the little things, what makes us think they're not going to lie in bigger things? The little white lie is only a glimpse of what we're capable of. Would you have something bigger?
When you lie about the little things and you keep doing that, it just becomes easier and easier to lie about the big things. And my guess would be that you will eventually.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I'll use the illustration. When you're a young child, when you're driving a motorcycle and you wreck, there's only a certain amount of collateral damage that can happen. Okay, you might hit somebody, you might morning door, you might kill yourself, you might kill someone else. But that's totally different than if you have an 18-wheeler loaded and you wreck. There's a much bigger ramification of that. And so it's better to good morning, here we go. It's better to get caught for lying when you're young and the ramifications are still yet small. Not that they're not wrong, not that it's not evil, but it's better to be caught in the little white lies, as we call them, when they're not so white, than it is to be, well, the executive of Enron who gets caught for embezzlement and lying about all that. So the consequences get bigger over time. But on a whole, righteous people hate lying because they love the truth. Also, number 4, there are dangers of talking too much, or of too much talking. Proverbs 10, we're on page 11, by the way. Proverbs 10:19, in a multitude of words there wanteth not sin, but he that refraineth his lips is wise. Proverbs 18:6-7, a fool's lips can enter into contention, and his mouth calleth for strokes. A fool's mouth is his destruction, and his lips are the snare of his soul. Proverbs 21:23, whoso keepeth his mouth and his tongue keepeth his soul from troubles. Proverbs 29:11, a fool uttereth all his mind, but a wise man keepeth it till afterwards. Ecclesiastes 5:2-3, be not rash with thy mouth, and let not thine heart be hasty to utter anything before God. For God is in heaven, and thou art upon earth. Therefore let thy words be few. For a dream cometh through a multitude of business, and a fool's voice is known by a multitude of words. Isn't that an interesting phrase? What's a characteristic of a fool? A multitude of words. They talk a lot, and a lot, and a lot. Also in the wisdom literature and Proverbs and Psalms, gossip, slander, and flattery all have disastrous effects. We read this one, I think, already before, but Proverbs 11:13, a talebearer revealeth secrets, but he that is of a faithful spirit concealeth the matter. Is this talking about he covers up sin? Okay, so what does it mean that he concealeth the matter? Okay. He's not blabbing it to the whole world. Okay. And we read this, a similar thing in 1 Corinthians 13, where love covers a multitude of sin. Okay. Sin has consequences. Okay. And someone who loves and someone who is compassionate, someone who is a faithful spirit, when someone fails, when someone does something wrong, they're not trying to make the whole world know. Those who need to know, those who have the truth and need to deal with it or need the corrective process, they know. But they're not running to everybody telling everything. They're concealing the matter. They're keeping it quiet because not everybody needs to know. Okay, that's not lying or deceitful. Yeah.
There are usually circumstances that haven't completely played out, and there are things that other people don't need to know because then they start adding, changing the facts.
Yeah.
And then the situation gets totally messed up.
Yeah. there was a gentleman who goes to my home church, and he was working a job, I think a temporary job for a while. And he started noticing something. He started noticing that a certain was loading up a truck, but it wasn't going down on records. And he noticed this, and once he's like, okay, I'm not sure. When you're new to something, don't assume evil. You know what I'm saying? Just observe before. And so after he observed this several times, he went to a manager or authority, and he said, hey, I don't know what's going on here, but this is happening constantly. And they thanked him for being honest. They thanked him for coming to them and reporting it. And they said, look, here's what we're doing. We're letting it play out. So we need you to be quiet. Okay? Yes, he's stealing. We know it. We're just letting it play out so that way we can catch him exactly in the act and get the authorities involved. And so we appreciate your honesty. We thank you for that. But we're working on that. So sometimes you're not going to open your mouth and tell everybody what's going on. You know, so it doesn't need to be blown out of proportion. Not everybody needs to know, but those who need to know should know, and you conceal it. You're not hiding it from God. You're not hiding it from the authorities. You're hiding it from those who really just don't need to know. And so you're being faithful. You're not amplifying the person's sin. Proverbs 16 says, an ungodly man diggeth up evil, and in his lips there's a burning fire. A forward man soweth strife, and a whisper separateth chief friends. There's a lot to deal here with sins of the tongue. A godly man is looking for that not godly. He's looking for that juicy tidbit from someone's past or something that is private. He's wanting to find evil. He's wanting to spread that to others. He wants to tear down a reputation. He's sowing strife and division. It says, a whisper separateth chief friends. Does not the devil do this constantly? Why did that person say that way? They must be mad at me. They must not like me. They must fill in the blank. And before long, a whisper from the devil, or a whisper from a human, or a whisper from somebody, we can change our whole way we look at a situation when, quite frankly, the person simply was tired. When the person didn't recognize you at the store. When the person didn't hear you because their hearing aids weren't in, or whatever it is, you know. A whisper separateth chief friends. Proverbs 17:9. He that covereth a transgression seeketh love, but he that repeateth a matter separateth very friends. Do you bring up the same fault over and over and over and over? Every time, do you remind the person, well, you know, I can't do this because, and you bring it up over and over and over, okay? Or keep it, okay, that what's in the past, it's done, it's dealt with, we move on. And so by concealing it in that sense, by not bringing it over and over and over, we save our friendships one with another, and truly we mimic the love of God. Because God doesn't dig up our past, does he? He deals with it, and we move on. And we walk in that. Do you have, Kathy?
I've seen this happen, I think probably all of us, with separations or divisions in churches, where it just starts with one or two people having a disagreement, and then they start talking about it to all the other people, and before you know it, you've got a huge strife going on.
Yeah.
Yes, they side with them, and it separates families.
And then you have the people who are trying to stay in the middle, and sometimes it becomes so hard. Yeah. The next verse here, where no wood is, there the fire goeth out. What a picture. We all know what that's like. You run out of wood, the fire's out. You get it. However, it says here, so where there is no talebearer, the strife ceaseth. Yeah.
When church discipline is so important.
Yes.
You get rid of the talebearer if they refuse to.
Yeah. And that's as a pastor, the role of pastor, teacher, shepherd is so important. Part of that shepherd role is sometimes there's problems. And a problem, if unattended, it's kind of like a sore where it could fester and it could get worse and infected way before it gets better. And so that is more the unenjoyable part of a pastor's job in protecting the flock. And there are those who are pastors who have taken and abused that and become dictators, and that's a very, very dangerous thing. But overall, where there's no wood, where there's no story to tell, where there's nothing, get the talebearer out, get the person that's stirring up strife out, and you'll find life is better for everybody. Proverbs 26:28. A lying tongue hateth those that are afflicted by it, and a flattering mouth worketh ruin. You lie to someone because you truly don't love them. If you loved them, you would know you need to give them the truth. Now, you need to give them the truth in love. Don't get me wrong. This is not a license to be a bull in a china shop, okay? But you give people the truth, and a flattering mouth worketh ruin. Not only does it, a couple things a flattering mouth does. One, when you flatter people, you know it, they're not going to believe what you do say when it is true. When you go to compliment them on something that is true, you're not going to believe it anyway. So it ruins your testimony and reputation. A flattering mouth also has potential of ruining the person you're flattering. Because you say all these nice things, then they get thinking about, oh, well, I am good at this, and then pride goeth before a fall. And so flattery is definitely a sin. It's a lying, but it's specifically lying to butter up someone and say something you would never say behind their back. Number 6, dealing with slander. Here the psalmist in Psalm 120 says, in my distress I cried unto the Lord, and he heard me. Deliver my soul, O Lord, from lying lips and from a deceitful tongue. He's calling for God to deliver him. Now, I'm not saying here it's never right for you to put the truth out of a situation. But as a believer, we don't have to chase down the lies. If something happens at work and we're accused of something, it doesn't mean when the manager or whoever comes to us and says, I want your side of this story, it doesn't mean, well, God will vindicate me. Okay, well, tell him your side of the story, all right? But it doesn't mean you run around the whole office and everywhere else and try to convince everybody of your side of the story. You don't need to do that. You can trust God and let the chips fall where they may. You don't have to take that, like I said, to the position where when those in authority or ask, or when somebody crucial asks, you tell them. You can still tell them, that's fine. But who are we to vindicate most, ourselves or Christ? And if we're willing to suffer for evil doing, Peter says that's a good thing. So the psalmist here commits his cry to the Lord. He commits the lies against him to the Lord and lets the Lord deal with that. Number 7, flattery is deceitful. Psalm 12, verses 2 to 3. They speak vanity, everyone with his neighbor. With flattering lips and with a double heart do they speak. The Lord shall cut off all flattering lips and a lying tongue that speaketh proud things. Proverbs 27:6. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. Why would a friend wound you? Because he loves you, but what's his motive? Yes, it may be love, but motive's not. What's he trying to accomplish by the wound? He's trying to help you fix something in your life. Now, a surgeon, when he cuts you open, is he doing that maliciously? Okay, my wife says yes. she says yes, and yet just the other day she's like, I'm getting glad, to the point I'm glad I had the hip surgery. So, you know. So no, he's not malicious, but he has to make that incision, that wound, to fix a deeper problem. A friend or a spouse, someone who loves us, comes to us, or a parent or whatever, they come to us and they approach us and they give us the truth. Often it hurts. The truth is often very painful. The truth is something we've been lying to ourselves about, we don't want to admit, and now someone's revealed it, and it hurts. We don't like it. So, but the wounds of a friend, it's there for a purpose. It's there to help us, to grow us, to draw closer to the Lord. Yeah.
And if that friend does reveal it to us, it's also accountability, and kind of you have somebody to help you go through it with.
Yes. Yep.
So it's not just you going through it by yourself or dealing with it by yourself. Now you have somebody to keep you accountable and encourage you to deal with it.
When as believers we choose to be lone wolves, we generally find we cannot walk as successfully as a lone wolf Christian as we can in a group. You will never find a perfect church, and the moment you do, if you join it, it won't be perfect anymore because you joined it. Same with me. There's no perfect people, so there's not going to be a perfect church. So just get over it and move on, you know. But I forgot where I was going with that. But anyway, what's that? Yeah. The second part of that verse says, the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. Now, which of the three sins of the tongue, lying, gossip, or slander, would this fall under? Or I'm sorry, flattery, gossip, or slander. Flattery, okay? So why would an enemy flatter you? The kisses of a friend, the flattery, Okay, what is the motive? Okay, they want to deceive you because they know this is a weakness. And if they can keep you weak in this, or if they can get you to amplify that weakness, guess who gets to sit back and mock? Now, it could destroy you, but it's also, again, destroying them too. So, when the person who hates your guts, they despise you, when they start buttering you up, watch out. Now, I will say this. Watchman Nee had a principle of life he lived by, in that those who stood against him, those who did not like him, those who would not work with him, when he heard their critiques of him, he often took them, not to heart in a personal way like he was emotionally distraught, but he said, in every critique, even my enemies, those who stand against me, there's a kernel of truth. And so he always tried to live in light of that, not shaming himself and whatever. An enemy amongst themselves will amplify your bad traits. But there's a kernel there of truth. And so he would try to live by that, and at several points he did like the psalmist. He turns it over to the Lord and says, okay, Lord, you have to deal with this. So just a helpful reminder for us, an example from him. All right, the prophets here, D. God's people are called lying children. In Isaiah 30, verse 9, it says that this a rebellious people, lying children, children that will not hear the law of the Lord. It's interesting that the people of God who were supposed to be receiving God's word, they were to be a light to the nations around them. They were to be the ones who exemplified what it was to follow God, to live as they ought to. They were to be the center that the world would look to and say, that's the true God. They were lying children. See, all through their history, they have false prophets. They prophesied things that were not from God. They listened to false gods, Baal or Ashtaroth and others. They took that in and they lied. And so Isaiah is describing them here as lying children. Just over and over, they continually lie. And notice they will not hear the law of the Lord. You don't want the truth when you're in the middle of a lie, because the truth exposes the lie. And the one thing you hate when you're in the middle of a lie is getting the truth exposed. Also here we have Jeremiah warns not to believe the lying words of false prophets. In Jeremiah 7 it says, "Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, amend your ways and your doings, and I will cause you to dwell in this place. Trust ye not in lying words, saying, The temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord are these. For if ye thoroughly amend your ways and your doings, if ye thoroughly execute judgment between a man and his neighbor," and the passage goes on. What they're saying there with that temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the prophets in Jeremiah's day were saying, we can't be overrun by Babylon. We can't be taken out because we have the temple of God. God's house is here. God won't let his house be overrun. We are immune. We have immunity. They apparently didn't know too well Israel's history. When in the days of Samuel and the Ark of the Covenant, when Samuel was a young boy and Hophni and Phinehas were Eli's sons, and they decided this great idea of, hey, let's take the Ark of God, the symbol of God's presence, let's take it into battle. It will make us win. And what happened? It got captured. And it was an ironic, and it's funny. I mean, honestly, you have to laugh at Scripture, because it becomes the hot potato that the different Philistine villages are throwing the Ark Covenant back and forth, because bad things happen to them wherever the Ark goes. But God's people looked at it as a good luck charm. And in Jeremiah's day, they're looking at the temple, that good luck charm. God won't let us this, that, the other, and they lost it all. They were sent into exile. Number 3, slander is condemned. Ezekiel 22:9. In thee are men that carry tales to shed blood, and in thee they eat upon the mountains, and in the midst of thee they commit lewdness. So there's those who are shedding slander one against another is condemned. We'll pick up next week with 13, bottom of page 13, with the New Testament reflection, and we'll go from there. Let's close in a word of prayer here this morning. Lord, we thank you for your word. And Lord, we ask that you would give us a heart and a desire for truth. May we love the truth and live the truth and share the truth in love. We ask this in your Son's name. Amen.